Hello, good morning, everyone. Feel free to hop on in. The chat should be open and unlocked. So as you come on in, I'd love for everyone to introduce yourself in the chat and put your name, your role, and your institution. And as you're filing in and introducing yourself in the chat, share one way that you've used generative AI in your course this fall if you have. And if you haven't, that's a-okay. You can put, I haven't used it yet. But let's go ahead and all introduce ourselves. Hello, good morning, Jody. I think it's morning for some, maybe afternoon for others. I should probably just say good day. Good day to most. But we'll go ahead and get started as folks come on in. Again, introduce yourself in the chat, share how you've been using generative AI this fall. Some housekeeping before we introduce ourselves and go through the agenda. The recording to this webinar and an attendee certificate will be shared with all attendees within the next 2 days. And then all recordings to all of these sessions, I think this is now our 5th roundup, can be found at packback.co/webinars. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A feature. You can also upvote questions, you can reply to questions, you can be anonymous, that all works, but put your questions in the Q&A. It's very easy for us to manage there. And then basically use the chat however you see fit. You can ask, questions to other folks, you can share your own perspectives. I'll often prompt you to engage in the chat. And then, in general, this will be recorded. Recording will be shared. Use the Q&A for questions, chat for just nice communication. So some introductions. My name is Kelsey Berenger. I'm the CEO of Packback. My career started as a high school chemistry and physics teacher, and I joined Packback a few years back working on implementation and supporting higher educational professionals that were using our software. I am joined today by the wonderful, and I had to make sure I triple checked how to pronounce her last name so I didn't mess this up, Dr. Lauren Swerk-Falkowski. Yeah, I did it. Awesome. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you. Great job in pronunciation. I am the Assistant Dean for Academic Affairs at Union College in Union County, New Jersey. And I've had experience both on the teaching side and now on the administrative side with curriculum and assessment.
Wonderful. And then I am joined by the wonderful Dr. Rufus Glasper, if you want to do a brief introduction.
Yes, welcome to everyone. Rufus Glasper, President and CEO for the League for Innovation in the Community College and Chancellor Emeritus of the Maricopa Community Colleges. So I'm here to represent also the administrative side to make sure that we keep this conversation open and inclusive.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So a bit of run of show for today. We're going to get an introduction from Dr. Rufus Glasper, and we'll talk about a little bit of generative AI in the news. We're going to review the Time for Class Study Fall 2023 update, look at some data, chat a little bit about what this means and what's next for us and what we can predict 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. And then we'll run into a panelist spotlight. So we'll talk a little bit about, and by we, I mean Lauren, will share her experience actually incorporating AI into curriculum before GPT went viral, and share a few case studies of how generative AI can be brought into teaching and learning experiences without necessarily putting ChatGPT in front of students. I think there's a spectrum for how we can approach this, and we're going to share some perspectives. We'll do closing remarks and resources, and then cap hopefully right before 12:30 Central. So to get us started, Rufus, will you maybe do a brief introduction? Welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. And again, it's a pleasure to have all of you join us. As you can see, this is number 5 of a series of 6 different, what we will generally call webinars. At the League for Innovation, we love to focus on the notion of innovation and thought leadership. In this particular space and in this particular topic, we started off with the webinar with our partners in Packback to introduce the whole notion of ChatGPT and generative AI. And now we have been having these, what I call town halls. Bringing the voices of the people to the table, bringing our colleges' voices to the table. And we will continue through number 5 and number 6. As we are bringing our partner colleges and their experiences to the table. I want you to think about what the progression has been, your individual progression or digression, quite frankly, from either run, force, run mentality to how we embrace this particular topic, and what are we doing internally with our institutions, not only with faculty and students, but with other staff and administration. My comment earlier was that faculty members and those who are on the instruction side of the house will be the guideposts to how our institutions embrace this particular form of technology and how they embrace technology in general. As fast as innovation is changing, we need to move as quickly as well. So with that, we welcome you back to the conversation, and we are looking forward to your thoughts and your engagement. Kelsey, back to you.
Great, thank you. Well, let's dive right on in. I love using these as opportunities to talk about AI in the news, specifically the intersection of generative AI and education, because a lot of folks use these sorts of activities, these town halls, to stay up to date with what's happening around us. Because sometimes, you know, reading a newsletter every single morning about AI is just, for me, gets a little bit overwhelming. So digest is nice. So Titan Partners and Turnitin came together. They ran a study called Time for Class Study back in spring of 2023. And what they were able to do is run an update of this study this fall. And this was actually published, I think, a month ago, but I was late to finding this and reading about it, so I'm talking about it today. And what I wanted to do was just talk about some of the sentiment changes between spring 23 and fall 23. Before we walk through this, I'm going to launch a poll. If you've been to many of these, you know I love polls, because I want to get an idea of the sentiment of this audience and how things have changed. So if you could go ahead, you should see a poll in front of your screen. First question, in spring 2023, how would you describe your use of generative AI like ChatGPT? And let's just say March, April timeframe. So not right in the new year, but let's say a few months into the spring term. Then how would you describe your current use of generative AI? So same question, but instead of spring 23, current. Last question is, what are your beliefs on whether students need to know how to effectively use Gen AI tools to succeed in professional settings? So I'll give everyone about a minute to answer this. And of course, once everyone answers this, Lauren, I'm going to ask you about, let's say, what spring 23 looked like for you versus fall 23. I have to say, I've always been a little overly obsessed with generative AI. In fact, I'm already like mentally preparing myself for the Thanksgiving holiday because I know that the 25 family members I have are just going to be asking me about ChatGPT the entire time. So that's going to be a fun holiday for me, but I'll give everyone just a few more moments. All right, I'm going to end this poll here and share the results. So it seems like back in spring 23, about an even mix, with the majority of attendees not using generative AI in the spring. Looks like we definitely have decreased the amount of folks who haven't used generative AI at all, certainly increasing the amount of frequent users. And it looks like majority of this audience definitely sees how generative AI needs to be used for our student success. So we've got a mixed bag of cats, as I like to say. So yeah, Lauren, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about what was your use of generative AI in, let's say, March, April of this year, and then what does it look like now?
I think I follow actually this poll result pretty well. I was interested in it. I would consider myself kind of a borderline early adopter to the early majority, just in general, of technology. I'm always interested in new technology, but I do kind of sit back and wait slightly just to see how things are going before I dive in. So in the spring, I had really just tried it out maybe once or twice. I actually used it in the spring. One of my colleagues I saw is on here. She will appreciate this. I used it in the spring when I had to write some workshop blurbs for a professional development event that we were hosting. So just time was of the essence. So that's how I tried it out, and I found it very useful. And now I probably use it weekly in different capacities just to help me out with different things that I'm working on in my current role. So.
Wonderful. So yeah, let's take a look at the results of this. So first we see the adoption from spring to fall. So there are two things, which is more folks are adopting generative AI. Not surprising, right? I think a lot of educators and faculty just kind of sat back and waited. They said, let me see if this is a sensation, or if it is an actual change in the way that we are going to live our lives. And I think that's probably smart and commendable, especially when we're still coming off of the COVID shift of changing our lives entirely. Maybe let's take it one life-altering moment at a time. And then the other piece too is students just still are falling slightly ahead of adoption related to faculty. So I don't know, Lauren, what has been your experience? I know that you're slightly removed from the students now, but have you experienced this kind of relationship where students are slightly ahead of faculty?
Yes, from what I've spoken with faculty, that the students are using it. Whether how they use it, we're not 100% sure yet. We're getting to that, and I'll be speaking to one of faculty group's approach to figuring all that out. But they are using it, and I for a time period I was working with the American Honors Group, and in my office with the students had an honors lounge right outside, so I just would listen, and they just talk like I'm not even there. But so, and they were talking about it. They were like, "Oh, I used ChatGPT for that, and it really helped." And even just to explain something to them. We had a lot of science majors, so they were putting the question in and having it come back to them in something that was a little more like digestible for them to understand a concept. So they are using it, and it was interesting just to hear them talk about it, just like another thing that they use. Like it wasn't a big deal to them.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I think one of my favorite stories about that was I have a family friend who's a department head at a university, and he was in his office, and students were so blatantly talking about how they were using it for not the best reasons, like not these, oh, I don't, Beowulf is too hard to read, I just needed to break it down for me. It was like, oh, it wrote an essay for me. And it's like, oh, okay, come on, kids, let's maybe let's be mindful of what we're saying and when we're saying it. But it is funny how sometimes oblivious our students
Yeah, and
are.
I was definitely in that role in that time period. I was in their space, so it was their lounge, and I just happened to have a desk in so it was their space, and they were very comfortable in there. And I don't think they realized that I could hear them, but they would just talk about, and these were honor students, so I didn't hear anyone talking about, oh yeah, I made it write my essay for me. They were more using it for just help in understanding things,
Yes,
or getting them started on things. So
I love that. As someone, I've never been a super confident reader of dense material. Like my junior of high school, when I had to pick up Shakespeare for the first time, I was like, oh boy, a Beowulf, I'm trying to think of like the Greek literature, right? And writing as well. And so this concept of, I could Google and say summary of Beowulf, but there's something different about the interaction and the usability and the user experience of ChatGPT that feels a little bit more magical. So yeah, a student could probably just go to Google for a summary of difficult text, but it feels more fun to use generative AI.
A couple of them who did coding for fun, they would ask it for codes too. So they would like creating their little game. Somebody created a game or an app or something. I don't even remember. I wasn't quite sure what they were doing, but I'm just gonna hope it was good things. So.
Yeah, good things. Well, this is what we were talking about earlier, which is faculty sentiment. So something that's interesting is that from spring to fall, what we're seeing is that folks, specifically faculty, are feeling less negative about the outcomes of generative AI on student learning. So less negative, but they're not necessarily feeling more positive. So what we have is just an increasing amount of neutrality. So I thought that was really interesting of where like maybe we're not there yet where everyone's ready to embrace AI and run full steam ahead. And I will say I'm happy to see that in general we're shifting a little bit more towards, okay, maybe it's solutions orientation of, all right, it's not going away, clearly it's here, time to get moving. What has your experience been with faculty sentiment?
I think that's kind of on par. I would say it was similar to that. I mean, just in general, my background is in the learning sciences and just brain science. So our brains prefer predictability. That's how we create those neural pathways, we follow the same one. We like the consistency. So when you throw in something new and something like this that's very unpredictable, and that it's very difficult to wrap your head around how it even operates, you just sort of have to have a faith almost that it does. It is not surprising that people are very hesitant to jumping on board to calling it positive just yet. So I think as we get to see how it plays out, and I mean, if you think of the bell curve of the early adopters, most of the people are not, like half the group is on the other side of the bell curve. So as we keep learning more about it and keep seeing how we could use this in different ways and keep hearing it create those neural pathways again, that now that becomes more consistent, and it's a little less scary for change.
Yeah.
So,
and almost too, it's like a reframe. I would love if these surveys and conversations could shift towards neutral, or still deciding to, I'm curious. I'm still doing research. I'm learning before I develop a firm sentiment around this, because to your point, this is unpredictable. It's new. We've had a lot of change in the last few years in education, and maybe it's just a time for a lot of folks to be able to be in an environment where they just ask questions about something before they're forced to identify, a sentiment. So,
and we don't know if neutral means apathetic, or if neutral means I don't know yet. I'm still a little unsure and still figuring it out. So
I'm on a
that
journey.
would be an interesting, who do we write to? I think that would be an interesting thing to add a category in our Likert scale there.
Let's do it. And this is the second faculty sentiment, which this was asking non-user AI user faculty members, there we go, and then AI using faculty members, whether or not they thought that generative AI was a skill that students need to be taught for their futures. And I think in general, we know that we need to prepare our students to coexist with technology, and then just be prepared for just about anything in the workforce. I'd like to say adaptability is important, but I think it's becoming increasingly clear, especially as more educators are using generative AI. And that's kind of the check I like to do is, all right, if you're a faculty member and you're using AI, that's an indication that maybe it's time to talk to your students about AI, because if you're doing it, they're going to be doing it. But Lauren, curious to hear your thoughts on this concept of AI being a skill that students need to develop for their careers.
I just don't think you said it earlier, it's not going away. I think it's something that's definitely going to be around. We had at the college at the beginning of the fall semester, our convocation speaker was from Jobs for the Future, and she said something that I'll just never forget it. And she said, AI is not going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI is going to take your job, because this is the way it's going. And she's at the forefront of the labor market and what's out there, what's coming, what we don't even know is a job yet. So I took that kind of to heart. So I really think and we know students are using it. So it's important to teach them how to use it responsibly, ethically, use it with a critical eye. So I think that's part of the teaching and learning processes. They're going to use it. They're already using it. They're going to be using it in their careers, whatever career they choose. So having the opportunity, we have the opportunity to work with them in a kind of a low stakes setting in the classroom, so to speak, so they can practice those skills and get used to it so it becomes a positive thing and what it can be, and doesn't get morphed into something that gets out of control.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that quote too. And I've said this multiple times, but I'll always come back to it. Quote my CTO says is, we tend to under or overestimate the amount of change that we'll experience in 1-2 years after something like transformative technology, but then really underestimate 10 years. So again, I think too, when we're talking to faculty and administration, let's focus a lot on, first and foremost, preparing our students, because they are the labor force in 10-15 years. And then once we've really, I think, figured out that, then let's start looking inwards and say, okay, operationally, how am I going to now take a look at my operations and see what I can make more successful with AI, or how I can better train faculty to be using AI. But I do think that priority in the conversation should be students, because I think they're going to be just most impacted by all of this.
Yeah, and we can't just take AI for what it says. I mean, the generative AI, like any researcher reading any article, or, you consider validity and reliability. So you want to know who else is saying this. Are they authentic? Is that a reliable source of what they're saying? Is this information that you can find somewhere else? Or is it actually what you asked it? Is it giving you the answer to the question you actually asked? So these are all skills that we can teach students. We teach them how to do it with a journal article. So why not teach them how to do it with AI? We know I'm going to age myself. We know Encyclopedia Britannica was reliable. Somebody did all that research, validated it, and said it was good. So we could use that as a source. But now the information for our students is sort of circumventing that third party that would do all that background. So we have to teach them those skills to really make sure they're getting the information that they intend to get and that it is authentic and real.
Yeah, absolutely. So shifting a little bit into faculty use of generative AI, the last kind of piece of the study that I'll mention was use of generative AI writing tools for faculty use. And the number one use was running prompts through AI to see what students would see if they were to do this, which, by the way, I think is a great activity. If you have the time and the energy to edit a writing assignment, this is a great way to go about it. I'm not going to assume everybody has, though, the time to stop, drop, roll, and edit all their writing assignments, nor should everyone need to do that, right? It's just based off of what you have, capacity for. There are also some really great uses of generative AI here for faculty to make their lives easier, because I think what I'm starting to realize, and I'm going to challenge myself to do in 2024, is what are just the really tedious things that I'm doing in my life. Our engineering team uses the word toil a lot. It's stuff that could be automated. It's stuff that's really manual, but doesn't necessarily require critical thinking. And starting to think of, how can I start removing some toil from my life? And yeah, maybe some of that is going to be the introduction of AI, but not always. But I think something like, all right, getting initial feedback on a writing sample, not a bad idea for something like generative AI, especially if I'm trying to work at 3 a.m. and I don't want to bug my head of marketing, right? So, Lauren, I want to put the spotlight on you and have you walk us through, and I have little visuals here on how you use generative AI recently to develop like a whole curriculum. I only have like a third of the screenshots you sent me.
Yeah. I wanted to see how it would do it. So I gave it a shot. I actually did one originally for a data science program, but I didn't save those. So then I did one for a course that I would love to create, an introduction to learning sciences. So you'll see what I prompted. I just went into the free chat GPT, which I recently learned does not connect to the internet. Only the paid version does. So a lot of things, this is just giving information based on what it's already learned from other people's stuff that they've used the tool. It's not actually combing the internet itself, which I found very interesting. So that actually, I'll speak to a little bit of that in the next couple of slides, but you'll see my prompt that I asked it at the top to create a description for first-year college course that focuses on the introduction to learning sciences. This course will have a prerequisite of general psychology. The course will be offered in a 15-week semester, and this course is for students majoring in psychology or education. And this is what it spit out. It gave me a little course description, it explained the prerequisite and why. It gave a course overview, and even just reading through it pretty quickly, it hit on the highlights of cognitive science, memory, motivation. I would go back and add a couple of other things, but I was surprised at how it hit the main topics. I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm still surprised by this. It gave me the key topics, even teaching. I didn't even ask it for teaching methodologies. I just wanted a course description, even how we could assess things, and then the outcomes upon completion of this course. And then I followed that up, because you can use ChatGPT like a conversation. So I actually followed that up with another prompt to kind of get more into the weeds. So using the course description that it gave me, then I wanted it to create 5 course learning outcomes. And I gave it different Bloom's levels of taxonomy that I wanted to include in my learning outcomes. So then it gave me what those different levels would be, and then an outcome for that. Again, these I would zhuzh a little bit and shortened, they're a little wordy. ChatGPT tends to be a little wordy, but it's a great start. So I wouldn't have had to just start from scratch and reinvent the wheel, or even go back to my old textbooks and course information to try to cobble something together. It just gives you a really nice foundation to jump off of. So that was how I kind of had a little conversation with it as I was thinking about, okay, well, what do I want to do next with it? And then from this, if I was to invent this course in my dream, I would then take this and modify to make it a little more straightforward.
Yeah. And then these were the other prompts I pulled, which was asking for free resources. And I think
Yeah,
that could, play on.
This is where, like, it would have, if I had the paid version, probably would have given me better resources, because I asked for the outline. So it gave me kind of the outline for the whole 15 weeks. But then it also, I wanted like peer reviewed, like you can say I want reputable journals, peer reviewed. But it only gave me some general journal articles, and it didn't give me like the links to things or anything like that. Whereas if I had the paid version, I probably would have been able to get a little more in-depth answers to that. But again, place to start, because I didn't want it to just be like, at first it was giving me my resources of textbooks, and I'm like, okay, but I wanted to get away from textbooks. I wanted more peer-reviewed information. So let's start.
And a plug too, there is another tool that's like a combination of a large language model and the internet called perplexity.ai. I've used it a lot. I wanted to figure out the like fall quarter start date of like, I had a laundry list of quarter schools, and I wanted to know their fall quarter start date. And I just put it in a Perplexity, and it came back and it gave me the answers. So it was like, I was about to give that task to one of my interns to do, like a tedious go through all the course catalogs of these 25 institutions, and it was able to do it in a sweep of the internet. So it's a really cool tool if you haven't tried it yet. So thank you for walking us through that. Any other last thoughts on this process of just building a curriculum from
No, I just think it would be, I was pleasantly surprised with what it gave me, and I still shouldn't be amazed. Like I said, I use this pretty weekly, but every time it gives me something, I'm amazed. And I really think it would be, and then I wanted to keep looking at it, because I wanted to keep seeing like, okay, well, if I'm using this particular journal, what could I pull out of there to actually make into an assignment or a group activity or something like that. So there's definitely, you can just keep talking to it like it's a little buddy, and see what information it gives you.
A little friend. While we transition to the next topic, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll just to hear from other folks how they're using generative AI. It's literally the same question that was asked in the study from Titan Partners, and turned it in. And curious to hear how folks are using AI for their own workflows. So feel free to ask that. We got an interesting question. The legality of using LLMs like ChatGPT to run calculations that include inputs with FERPA information. Does this change depending on if someone is using a personal ChatGPT account versus enterprise? So this is a great question. This is where, quite frankly, we need the folks who are asking questions in education to be asking that question consistently, because our innovators are going to want to run and sprint and put all of their student work through ChatGPT and figure that stuff out. The reality is ChatGPT is not tuned for educational purposes. That's not the problem it's trying to solve. The CEO of OpenAI and the founder of OpenAI, they didn't launch ChatGPT to help teachers be better teachers and students be better students. They launched a chatbot that was really cool, that is made for use for everyone in the universe, not just students and educators. So if you are an educator and you are using generative AI, be certain to understand what data is appropriate for you to share with the generative AI model and what data isn't appropriate. So I will say generative AI is not FERPA compliant. So if you go and you take, let's say, a bunch of student submissions and you just feed it into ChatGPT, you are now training OpenAI's large language model on student data. If you did not get their permission, again, there you are in that, in essence, not for compliant in that action. Now, I don't want to scare anyone, okay? A lot of people have made probably a little bit of blunders. It's why we've had a lot of organizations had to put generative AI policies out there to say, hey, by the way, if any information is under an NDA or is part of our intellectual property, don't put it in generative AI. Now, there is a way to incorporate large language models into programs and address compliance issues, data security issues, which we could talk a little bit about, but that is something to be mindful of as you're starting to think about generative AI use, making sure you're doing it in a way that is, data security, morally, ethically sound, all of those great things. So speaking of, we're going to shift into a little bit of a back and forth talking about AI use, specifically from Lauren's perspective. Now, if you've been to these, we rarely talk about PackBack during these. I am the CEO of PackBack. I've worked at PackBack for a while. I am not about to give a PackBack demo. I'm actually not really going to talk about PackBack at all. We're going to talk about a story that relates to PackBack. The reason being, PackBack is an AI-powered writing and engagement platform. It's a solution that was made for students and educators to solve some problems like disengaged students, giving students more feedback, helping educators grade at scale, and then engage with their students at scale. But PackBack is an AI-powered product that's existed in the market for quite some time. And Lauren, you specifically helped bring PackBack to your university and put it in front of faculty, and you experienced firsthand over a year ago, right, before generative AI went mainstream, what it felt like to put AI in front of faculty and the challenges that you faced putting AI in front of faculty, and then what it took for faculty to embrace artificial intelligence. So can you chat a little bit more about some of the challenges you faced when your institution decided to adopt PackBack, and it was, I think, your responsibility to put it into curriculum and into faculty hands?
I was on the team that initially brought it to Union. It wasn't solely my responsibility, but I was definitely involved in it. And it was about 4 years ago, actually. So it was very, like, AI was very new, and even talking about it seemed very abstract. Like nobody could really grasp what was happening. A lot of it came as there was some resistance in that, it's going to, like, because it had the piece of grading in it. It was, well, then what do you need the teacher for? Is this going to take us out of the, like, they don't need us. Obviously that is not the case with PackBack, but it was, again, just going back to that, as humans, we're hesitant of what we don't know and don't understand. So it was even, think about, now we have heard of ChatGPT and generative AI and things like, and it's more of a conversation. Back 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was not even in the conversation. So it was definitely kind of scary. And I didn't truly understand what it was doing either until I taught with it in my class. I was like, oh, I get it. This is pretty cool. And then it made a lot more sense. And then that actually helped me in working with instructors too, because I had more of a firsthand experience and I could kind of translate it into, like, from tech language to what are you going to do with it in the classroom language. So I think that helped. And it was a lot of training and a lot of just exposing people to it. I think someone in the Q&A had mentioned training, and it's super important because the more you become familiar with something and how it works or how you can use it, that's when then you start getting more creative in what you can do with it, and it becomes a little less intimidating or a little less scary. So I think training is really important, and working with the early adopters, because there's always those people that just jump in and really love anything that you show them and they just want to use it. So working with those champions to then help you bring others into the trainings, and maybe working with people one-on-one, taking it down to, like, the small parts, breaking your, large goals are not likely to be completed. If you have little goals along the way, you're more likely to complete those. So even trying something like AI, breaking it down into little parts, you don't need to create a whole course. You don't need to even create a whole assignment. You can ask it for one particular resource that you are having trouble finding, you want to use some current event related to a topic in your class, just as a point of discussion, but you don't want to sift through all the Google responses. So you can ask it and it can give you some suggestions, more pointed suggestions than having to sift through a Google search. So it's just even trying it out in little bits is definitely helpful. We did that with Packback. Instead of we started with, you have to set up your whole semester, and that was very overwhelming. So we broke it down. Let's just try one assignment for using Packback discussions. And that worked. People got on board just trying that one question. They didn't have to jump in and redesign their whole course to include something new that they didn't even really know if they were going to like or what to do with it. So respecting that pace that people want to learn, I think is really important to adopting anything new, whether it's technology or a curriculum or even a new textbook. So just respecting the pace that people need to understand, digest, and be comfortable with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny too, sometimes, just to like hold the mirror up and say like, all right, what would I do for my students? How would I approach teaching a new technology or a new concept to students? You probably wouldn't just like drop them into the deep end and expect them to swim right away. So it's think like, what would I use? Probably a gradual release of responsibility model. Maybe let's just start there. And so when I'm thinking about, all right, I have an AI tool, I'm an administrator, I've decided to adopt an AI tool for all of faculty to use. What's the way in which I'm going to now expect faculty to get on board? And it sounds like we just need to be mindful of pace and then training. I think that's a huge piece, is people fear what they don't know. And as soon as it's clear and explainable and easy to understand, everyone's maybe not on board, but at least understands why they don't want to be on board,
Right. Yeah. It's not just the no for the, I'm too afraid. I mean, not to throw shade at my mother-in-law, but she's very afraid of technology, and she'll admit it. And she just says no off the bat because she is so afraid of even trying it. So my husband and I have been working with her. Hey, now she has an iPhone, and now she's, she can text me and she can send me pictures. So, but it took a little bit of time to even just get her to try that little baby step. And everyone has their own pace. So just understanding that, I think, is important.
I love that. And, continuing on with this conversation, you told me about a project that some of your colleagues did. They were chemistry instructors. And, I think there are a large amount of instructors who understand AI and generative AI it's not going away. It's here. It's not just a blip. I have to face it. I don't want to put it in front of my students, and I'm not even sure I want to be using it quite yet. I just haven't really found my flow. How do I accommodate both of those sentiments? And I think the story of your colleagues in the chemistry department is a great example of how you can start incorporating lessons or approaches or strategies or assignments that face the realities of generative AI and the skills that students will need to develop without necessarily throwing ChatGPT in front of them. So can you share a little bit more about what your colleagues did, the goal?
Sure. It was a group, it was two instructors in chemistry, Professor Sherry Haidari and Dr. Vikul Rajpara, and they collaborated. They actually reached out to two of our learning resources staff members, Quayle Snowden and Lana Liddy Lapadora, who I believe are on this. So hi guys. And so they reached out because the professors knew that the students were using ChatGPT, but they literally didn't know anything about it, but they wanted to learn about it. So they approached our learning resources staff, and they came up with this together. The four of them came up with this project, this semester-long project. They launched it in the summer. They called it the AI Fight Club, and it was in their honors Gen Chem class. And what they did was they had the students, basically, they created this assignment where the students were intentionally going to use different generative AI tools, but teaching them along the way how to evaluate the tool and the responses to ensure that they're actually using the tool in a responsible, ethical, and get information that is appropriate. So they used at the time they were using ChatGPT and Bard, and then they also included Turnitin, which the college includes, as well as Packback deep dives. And this was not a plug for PackBag. They just happened to use it. So they asked the students a really simple question in the assignment: what is density? And the students, they had to put it into the into the generative AI, respond with between 200 and 250 words, and explaining in terms that a first year STEM major would understand. And then they got the response, and they were then part of their assignment was to review it for accuracy. They also had to put it in to turn it in to see if it got flagged for plagiarism. If they were then satisfied with the response, they could submit the response. And that was literally the whole assignment. They weren't graded on the content. It was just the process of doing this. And if they weren't satisfied, they had the chance to edit it and submit what they wanted. And they did it with ChatGPT, and then they replicated it with Google Bard. And then after they did both of those, the instructors sent them out a survey where they collected some just basic data. What was the ease of use of each of them? What was the accuracy, and which one had more plagiarism flags, and which one were they most likely to use? And so they analyzed those responses and they discussed them with the students. And lastly, they had to then actually create their own response to the question: what is density? So, and they had to put their own response then into the plagiarism checker. And then they had to then take their original response. Then they submitted it. So there's another phase. They submitted for a grade. Then they took that original response and put it into the deep dives. And they were supposed to then use the instructional AI to help them with their grammar, punctuation, style, all of that good stuff, writing convention for an academic response. And then they had to submit that. So it was just this process throughout the semester, these little assignments. It wasn't like their whole project, but it was just to get them thinking and using the tools in a way that could actually benefit them in the long run in their educational journey. And then this semester, I was told, they shared, they are expanding it. They're now adding Claude, I think, is a new generative tool. And they're going to try to compare like first year students' responses to second year student response, like the survey responses, to see if there's any difference. Or so they're really, and they just want to keep going. So any new tool that pops up, they want to keep bringing it in and adding to their repertoire of what they're learning. And Professor Haidari shared, she learned a lot about the tools while alongside the students learning them. So it wasn't like she didn't need to be the expert. She used her, she worked with our learning resources team that had the knowledge of it, but she learned along with the students. So she said it was a great experience. The students liked it. And she said so that's why they're keeping it going throughout the year. So that was what they did.
Yeah. I love that, because I think it's like, no one had to be an expert on AI there.
Mhm.
It's like, go ask the most basic chemistry question. What is chemistry?
What is
All these different AIs and compare them. And then the action isn't edit the AI, it's analyze the AI, compare it, like do what we know you're going to need to do in your futures, which is evaluate the responses provided by AI. And you could take that in any direction too. I could say, hey, you have a chemistry textbook that I vetted, that I know I love. I want you to go compare the results to the chemistry textbook results, and then give me your evaluation of it. What did you trust more? Why did you trust it more? What do you think was more clearer to understand? Maybe they say, I trusted the text, but the description I got from generative AI was actually a lot better, right? So I think there's a lot we could do in teaching our students evaluation skills, which when we're looking at Bloom's, right, that's the tippity top, is let's evaluate and create. So I love that as a concept. And generally too, thinking about the process of an assignment, the process of thinking, the process of writing versus just give me your final product. What is density? One's a lot more fun.
Yeah. And I think, as they had mentioned, as their chemistry, this is Gen Chem 1. So most of the students are chemistry majors or STEM majors of some sort. So they have an interest in chemistry, not necessarily the writing piece, but they still need to know how to write effectively in their field. So this was just a way for them to bring in the writing piece into the chemistry course without having to like write a research paper or something very straightforward and standard. So they can use the tools that are at their disposal to help them with the writing that they're going to be doing in their careers.
Yeah. And there's a great question that came in that said, a concern I've heard from faculty is that students using AI are learning how to edit, which is different from writing. How do we teach students how to write and they cannot bypass with clever prompts and editing. I have a hot take. I'm not a writing expert here at all, but I also feel like for me, I started feeling really comfortable with the editing process only once I felt really comfortable with like honing in on my ability to write, period. Like I really needed to understand the mechanics of writing, but the strategy of writing. And then I felt like, oh, I'm an editing queen and master. So I don't know, Lauren, if you have any thoughts on that, but part of it is thinking, even if my hot take, and I'm an optimist, so maybe you can be the yin to my yang here, but I have a feeling you're an optimist too, is that generative AI, yes, I think it could help generate content for students and maybe even bypass some of this writing stage, but it seems to me like they still need to have the foundational skills if they're going to be able to prompt this effectively, and if they're going to be able to put their weight behind a submission generated by AI. I don't know what your thought is there.
I am not the rhetoric writing expert either. I think I know from all right, so let me speak. I don't know if this is going to translate well, but let me see. I speak to kind of the reading perspective. You become a better writer when you read a lot. So even just, I think, yes, I totally understand the point. They're not generating from scratch the writing. I get it. But by reading the content that is relatively well written from the chat GPT, they are learning the mechanics and the structure and the flow of writing. So I'm sure there's experts out there in the reading and writing fields that may not agree with me, but I actually see both sides. I'm going to be neutral on this. I could see how I understand the point where you're not generating that thought and that written thought from scratch. And that is definitely a challenging task to do, which is why I would default right now in my career to chat GPT to help me, because sometimes it just takes too long to have to think when you have the blinking cursor, and it takes too long to have to think of that first sentence. So but we also do that for students as a way to help them. We give them sentence stems, we give them prompts, we give them information to help encourage. The point of the prompt can be to encourage the thought generation. So maybe this is just an extensive prompt. But I do think that the more that they read the content, that you do become a better writer by reading, because you begin to understand how ideas are connected together and how the flow of the sentences are supposed to go, and just connecting your ideas and transitions. And you see that when you're reading it, and that then becomes mirrored and reflected in your writing.
Yeah. I think to the advice that I've been giving folks is faculty administration is don't flip the script right now. It's too soon. It's really too soon for us to start massively changing the way that we're doing things. I think we need to, the benefit we have is that in general education, we'll do the research to understand what's actually sound from a methodology perspective, but we don't quite know yet if the skill of writing is dead. I will say, and maybe this is just a reflection on what I do for a living, but I have never written and edited language more since the emergence of ChatGPT. And in fact, I would say I actually feel more motivated to write myself because I feel like I have a really unique tone and approach to writing. Goofy is the way I would describe it. Goofy tone. But I actually feel more inclined to write, but I also do, if I hit a brick wall or writer's block, I now have a tool where I can say, oh, what should come next? What things should I dig into next? Or how should I transfer from this thought to this thought? So that's my hot take on the situation.
There will be many researchers studying this in the future. So anyone out there, dissertation topic in the future, go ahead. It's right there for you. How to use AI in writing instruction.
go back to school and torture myself. But okay, I'm going to go off script here a little bit and ask you this question, Lauren, which is in the Q&A, we got a question about how an attendee is currently taking a AI course for instructors completely designed by AI. And then the instructors contribute to the body of knowledge in the class. What are your thoughts on learning from AI and taking courses that are maybe entirely written by AI?
Never thought about that. That's pretty cool. I would just want to do it more for the from the researcher perspective, just to see how it goes, not necessarily with the intention of learning from the AI, but just learning of what it did and what it gave us and what it expected us to do. That would be that would be very interesting to me, just to almost like as a naturalistic observer of the experience of taking a course created by AI. Interesting. I don't see why it wouldn't be pretty, I mean, based on what it was giving me, even for my syllabus, I don't see why it wouldn't be pretty effective.
Yeah, and two, I think one of the things that excites me most about generative AI is I think it is a way to provide personalized learning experiences.
Mhm.
Now, I think this is still early days, but there's a thought of like I'm plagiarizing right now from our CTO Craig Booth, but there's this question of, okay, I really want to learn how to rehab my house. I want to redo my kitchen. Generative AI, give me a template for the 10-step process of learning how to rehab a kitchen. And it could not maybe teach you how to rehab a kitchen, but give you the 10 steps. You need to go watch this YouTube video. First, you need to nail this. You need to understand how to remove cabinets or sand wood, something like that. So there's a concept of using generative AI for personalized learning experiences that I think is really exciting and only has upside. Has a lot of upside.
Yeah, and I was when I was thinking of the writing question, and I was just thinking of universal design. Like, not everyone's, again, back to your brain, not everybody's brain is naturally inclined to write well, or naturally inclined to be like, my husband's like, I call him a human calculator. He can do math in his head like nothing I've ever seen before. And he explains to me, he can explain to me how he does it, but my brain doesn't do that. So like, not everybody's, we all learn differently. So being able to use this as another tool to help students who may not have that natural ability to just come up with those creative ideas and translate them into written language, because it's its own writing is not something that is natural to us, whereas speaking more is. So like, it is a learned thing, and being able to give someone another tool to support them in that opportunity, in doing that, I just see it as a really positive thing that we can eventually bring into the classroom when we really learn about how to do it. And I think even just equitable opportunities for learning, I think it really does open the door for providing a lot more with not a lot of extra effort on the instructor part.
Yeah.
Hey, Kelsey.
Yeah.
Let me ask just a couple of things as we're starting to wind down.
Yeah.
Lauren, this is the first question for you is, when you were talking about your experiences and what you were writing, you said that you could have received more input if you had the purchase version.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that? Is that an institutional decision? Is it a cost decision? And if you had the opportunity to get the purchase version, what's stopping you?
This was just a personal thing. It's my personal account that I created. It's not through the institution. So I just signed up for the free Chat GPT. Again, when I signed up, because I was like, remember, I'm one of those like early to maybe mid adopters. So I wasn't too sure. I wasn't going to jump in and pay for anything yet if I didn't like this thing. So you have the free version. I don't even know what the cost of the paid version is. So
Month, I pay for it.
Yeah. I don't even know what it is. So, but like, I'm not opposed to doing the paid version. I just didn't have access to it at that point. It was just a first.
Well, I'm just thinking about institutional decisions so
Mhm.
that faculty and others can maximize and be able to make some conscious decisions based upon the most level of knowledge they can get.
Mhm.
But the next question in the chat, there was a question about we need to hear student voices. What are your thoughts about having a town hall discussion like this and inviting students to be a part of that conversation? And what do you think the role of students, what should be the role of students in this educational process and this evolution of AI, Chat GPT, and so forth?
I think students should definitely be involved in the conversation. That's a great idea. I mean, to me, learning is a social endeavor. You don't learn, you have to interact with something or someone in some shape or form to learn something. So even if you're just reading a book, somebody wrote that book. There's some sort of a connection in there. So engaging the students, learning alongside them, because this is such a fast-paced change that's happening. I mean, look what ChatGPT did in a year. It's happening so quickly. So there's no way that I just don't see it possible that instructors or universities or colleges can be so far ahead to be able to then teach the students that are coming in. Everyone's learning it together because it's happening so fast. So I think bringing the students into that conversation is really important. And also going beyond even outside of the schools to what is this doing in industries, in different fields that the students are going to go into, like how are they seeing it already, so everyone can have an idea of what they're going to be perhaps seeing in 10 years or even 2 years at this point at the pace that we're going. So I think that's an awesome idea to bring in the students to the conversation.
And lastly, my thoughts are on practices versus policies. It sounds like your institution has adopted some practices that they're trying to work through different departments and being more inclusive and engaging. Have you reached the point I guess with the rapid changes and still the need for learning more, have you reached the point to propose any type of policies, or are we still months and months away because it's changing so much?
I'm not at the policy level, but I know that there have been discussions of, do we need one? Should we have one? What would it look like? We don't have anything in place at this point. It would be so hard because it does change so much. If there's a policy, it would definitely have to be reviewed annually, minimum, just because of the pace of change of everything and what's going to come out. So I know there has been conversations of it. We do, at my institution at least, we don't have a policy at this point. I know a group is looking into it, so it's on the table.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks so much. Well, thanks so much for joining, everyone. There's also really great conversation happening in the chat. And want to just allow, I give a brief note of this. I know we're running low on time, but this is actually a cartoon that Lauren told me about. And you said this is from the 1800s, yeah?
Yes, as a good researcher, I did my homework. This is a real cartoon. According to the Ohio State University Library, it was published by the Judge Publishing Company in 1889. And the story behind it was there was a gentleman working on what he understood to be like a cable, a low voltage telegraph line. And this was in downtown Manhattan. And it actually, a few blocks away, the wire got crossed with a high voltage wire, and he did get, unfortunately, he did get electrocuted. But the story then went crazy, and it started a whole anti-electricity campaign that people were so afraid of the advent of electricity coming into the mainstream world. So, humans are not, like I said, we are not very welcoming of things that are new that we don't understand. So just as now it seems crazy that people would be against electricity, maybe in 100 years people will be saying that about AI. So we'll see.
It's all perspective.
I don't know. I won't see. Someone will see.
It is all perspective, right? That is 100% it. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you are curious about PackBack, by the way, you're going to email curious@packback.co. That's great. I want to allow Lauren and then Rufus to give any final thought, whether if it's an advice or something that they wanted to share but haven't shared yet. So yeah, Lauren, let's start with you.
I just think that, working with, and now on the administrative side and working with faculty and curriculum development, I think just welcoming the understanding that everyone's going to learn at their own pace. And that goes for our students too. Not every student's going to want to jump into AI either, just because they are of that younger generation. So I think it's important that we understand and take all of the push for AI and changing things. I think just taking that at your own pace, but don't resist. I know I shouldn't say don't resist. That's kind of horrible, the saying the don't, but be open to at least trying it out in a little bitty step. Like you said, maybe just ask it for a recipe. It doesn't have to be anything related to your teaching. Just try something out. Apparently it gives great recipes. If you can just type in the ingredients you have in your fridge, and it gives you what you can make for dinner. So just try that out just for fun and see how it goes. And then it could help you. Just getting your feet wet, taking it a little bit at a time, I think is a good way. And just keep in mind that this is all for the students. Like, we're here to help them prepare for their future, which then because they're going to be taking care of us. So we have to make sure that they're doing it in a way that they understand what they're getting into, and we can learn with them. That's the fun part. It's okay to be humble and understand that you don't know everything, even if you're the instructor.
It is about the students at the end of the day. Rufus, yeah, will you recap us out, share any of your final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thoughts are to definitely thank Lauren for her comments today, and the notion that students need to be engaged and provided a platform. I love the fact that you were able to listen to those students in the other room, and I think that they knew you were listening. So
I don't know.
well, I mean,
it was kind of fun thinking they didn't, because then I could just listen to everything.
But I also believe that there's a lot that we can learn by engaging. And we talked about students at the center, and having their voices at the table give us that opportunity to balance their input and make adjustments. And I also think that because of the generation and such, you talked about the moms and family, the older different generations, that they can help us become more comfortable. And they can also help us kind of, and I hate to say this, in a way that help us think like they are thinking. And if we can adapt and adopt some of those practices, then I think it works on both ends, that the teacher becomes the student and the student becomes the teacher, and we all grow as an institution. And that kind of engagement will then impact practices and policies. I know that we're waiting for the yin to reach, but somewhere along the way, somebody's going to be reactive, and they need to be reactive to the facts and the data that we collect. So thank you again. It's been a great session.
Thank you so much all for joining. Thank you so much, Lauren, for joining our panel, and Rufus for making this space for us. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and yeah, maybe the final takeaway is one next step. Maybe your next step is not using generative AI, but just asking a student how they're using generative AI. That sounds like a great next step. All right. Bye, everyone. Good afternoon.
Bye.